Welcome back, everyone. You are in the gap on WYTV7 Christian Broadcast, and I am your host, Keith Smith, and I am joined tonight by my wonderfully beautiful wife, Dorothy Pearson Smith. And I had my wife, yes, wave to everyone. I had my wife come on tonight because we wanted to share our story with you guys. Because my thoughts were there were probably some people going through the same type of fears that we had, being middle-aged single people, trying to have a second go at life again in a relationship. And it can be very stressful, very fearful. And for me, if you've been following the broadcast, that I was in 8.5 years of incarceration. So coming home, I felt like I had prepared myself really, really well as far as what I wanted to do professionally, the choices and decisions I was going to make going forward, my new relationship with Jesus Christ. I didn't much worry about where I would be, how I would be financially. I knew that God would make those a way for me. So for me, I just had this burning desire that I wanted another go at companionship, relationship, and ultimately marriage again, because I got divorced during my incarceration. So I'd been divorced for 7 years when I came home, 7 to 8 years. I don't know the exact time frame. So when I came home, I was like, I got the qualities that I want to meet in a woman. And, I had them in my head. I had prayed over them. These are the things that I want, Lord. Help me be patient to find this person, because this may be my last crack at it. I didn't want to miss out. I wanted to get something with my new life that fit in and could make me the best person I could be. And I prayed over it and prayed over it and prayed over it. Well, when I came home, I went to stay with my best friend of my whole life. We were best friends since staying at a nursery school together, 4 years old. And he was kind of filling me in on how you had to date, because me being home for so long, it had changed a lot. Meeting people in Walmart or at a restaurant or other places, the church, it went by the wayside. Technology had grown, social media had grown. And he was telling me, if you're going to meet someone, you have to meet someone on social media. Well, I'm not a social media type guy. I don't do well with touchscreen cell phones even to this day. And there's certain things I still don't know how to do. So I refused to do it. And when we would go places, I would try to meet people, but he was right. They were looking at their devices. So I can never forget that I was just growing so tired of every other thing. Seemed like I was ready for stuff to fall in place, but I was like, Lord, I have not met that special person yet. So I can remember it was January 1st, New Year's Eve, and I had made a declaration that I would not spend another New Year's Eve alone, because I was miserable. Even though I was with my friend and we were down in Charleston just hanging out, having a good time, I wanted that significant other. I wanted that person to share special things with. So I let some friends of mine talk me in to putting a picture of me on social media, on a social dating site, and just a few little lines. And I said, this will never work. But lo and behold, I was amazed that you don't have to hardly say anything. Just put a picture up there and they don't even know if it's you or not. And they'll just start sending messages. Well, I wouldn't reply to them. But when we got back the next day to our house in Georgetown, I sat down and I said, you know what, if I'm going to give this a go, I'm going to do my own profile on my own site, and I'm going to say exactly what I want to say. And if that's not good enough, I don't know what else to do. And that's exactly what I did. And I started getting some response. But that's not the big part of this story. The big part of this story takes place on Friday night, somewhere between 7 to 8. I had been on social media for approximately 2 days, and I was already growing tired of the dating sites. It was starting to be nerve-wracking. And I was on the phone with my daughter and texting someone at the same time. I was trying to get good at it. And lo and behold, from the dating site that I was on, a little circle popped up. And there was a picture in it. And it was of a beautiful woman that had matched physically everything that I had wanted in a woman, just in that little circle. And it intrigued me enough that I got off the phone with my daughter, quit texting that person, and I clicked on it and went to her profile. And it was this lovely lady right here. I know I got lucky. Well, I'm not lucky. I got blessed, and God heard my prayer on my very first try with this. So our stories are a little bit different, wouldn't you say? So I'm going to let her catch you up with where she was at in this particular time in her life.
Actually, it began October the 7th of 2016. I was looking for a church home for myself and my children. And there was this church that was running a commercial. The commercial would come on every time I turned around. I was like, oh my goodness, if I didn't know any better, I thought something was going on sale at this church, because that's how frequent their advertisement was running. And I said, the next time I see this commercial, I'm going to get my phone and I'm going to take a picture of it, because the church name was very unusual. So sure enough, this day on October the 7th of 2016, I actually grabbed my phone because that commercial had came on, and I took a picture of it. Didn't think any more about it, maybe on some Sundays, maybe we should go here, visit here, but never did. Well, during that time, October into December, I had been going back to my primary care physician and having some lab work done. And there was this phlebotomist that was there. And she actually was sharing with me a story about, her friend who had met a guy and that things were going well. Okay. And so I left the office, went back a couple of weeks later to have some more lab work done. And I remember me saying to her, I said, how's your friend doing, with this guy? She said, oh, they're doing great. I was like, okay, wonderful. I was like, well, where did she meet this guy? Because she told me it was an online dating website. And when she told me the name of the website, I was like, oh my God, no, I won't go back on that website. I had been on that website like 8 or 9 years before that. And I was like, oh no, not me. I won't go on this website, never again. And she said, well, when you were on there, did you give it an honest effort? I said, well, I created my profile and I just waited. And she says, I want you to go on there again, and this time, give it an honest effort. And when she said that, I knew that was not her voice. It was not her voice that I heard. I knew instinctively through the Spirit of God that was the voice of God speaking. It was not her voice. So that had to have been on a Tuesday or Wednesday. I started my profile not that night, the next night. What I wanted to do was make sure I had pretty much everything outlined and be as methodical and thorough as I could be, and up-to-date pictures. So that came, I knew that weekend, on that Friday, I would have more flexibility to finish out my profile and get everything started and go active on the site. Sure enough, Friday came and I finished up my profile and got online, set my preferences, and well, not even an hour later, this sexy man's picture comes up. And I was just smitten, not only by his physical appearance, because, let's all, be real here. When you're on a dating website, the first thing you see is a picture. That has to engage you at first. And then I went to read his entire profile. And as I read his profile, I knew that he was genuine in what he was speaking, even though it was mere words, some would say. But it was words that were effective and words that I knew were truth. Well, needless to say, I actually sent him a message and asked his, actually, I sent a message introducing myself. And I said, hey, not sure if you date outside of your race or if it's something you've considered. However, just, want to let you know your profile caught my attention. Something along that line. Well, within few moments, it's like you would think we had instant messaging, but we really didn't. He actually responded. He said, oh, absolutely. And he said, he gave me like a trivia of some sort. And
trivia.
He said, the right answer will get you my number. And I said, well, I'm thinking to myself, when I was on here before, that saying went kind of at the wayside, but I told God, I said, God, if I can't be who I am, I can't be anybody. So I said what I would have said normally when I was on there years ago. I said, you lead, I'll follow. So sure enough, we connected, and within 10 minutes of a phone conversation, I had asked him, I said, you've been spending time with God, haven't you? He said, yes. I said, well, instinctively, I'm like, okay. Well, anyone who's spent, especially a man, who spent that kind of time with God, usually it's due to incarceration. And so I had asked him, I said, hey, have you been incarcerated? He said, yes, I have. He was very honest. He shared, what happened, and he actually said, you can Google me. I was like, okay. So that was like 10 minutes, and 10 minutes additional passed by, and he says, you're in Columbia, right? I said, yeah. He says, I have a friend that's a pastor there. I said, oh, yeah? I said, where's the church located? He says, I don't know where it's located. I said, well, what's the church name? He says, Heart Epic. I screamed at the top of my lungs because that was the same church. Now, mind you, we're January 2017. That's the same church that was having their commercial advertised every moment of the moment. And I took a picture of it. Still have that picture in my phone to this day. Nonetheless, we continued to have a conversation. We conversed the entire weekend. Well, by that time, I knew Sunday was wrapping up, workday Monday, and usually if I've known or heard that a gentleman or, had been incarcerated, that was a deal breaker for me because I know where I want to be in life. I know things I'd like to do in life, and having that additional obstacle just wasn't in my foresight. So that would normally be an automatic thanks, but no thanks. But this situation was totally different. That's a God situation. So needless to say, Sunday came around. I'm, getting ready to go back to work. On Monday, preparing for that, work day. And I remember telling him, hey, I really like you. I think you're a great guy, but I just think you got too many irons in the fire. And I remember him saying, what do you mean by that? I said, every time I turn around, your phone is beeping. You can hear when your phone is going off. You know how you can hear the static. You can tell when someone is texting. It was just a lot. Even though I endured it through the weekend, I recognized it. And I remember sharing with him, hey, I think you're a great guy, but I'm not going to be an option. So, and I basically said, thanks, but no thanks. And he didn't, want to discontinue the conversations. However, he said, if that's what you want, I'll respect that. I have to. Well, we said our goodbyes. And the moment I hung up that phone, I wept and I wept and I wept. And for the life of me, I could not understand why. You would have thought someone told me something happened to one of my children. I wept. I sobbed. I mean, it went on for a while. And I'm talking to God. God, I don't understand this. Why am I feeling this way? It's not like we've been intimate and there's soul ties. What's going on here? Could not figure it out. So once I got myself together, I phoned him back. He didn't answer. Usually something like that would bother me, but this particular night it didn't. I was able to get a good night's sleep. I made my mind up. When I get to work tomorrow, I'll just call him when I get to my office. Well, sure enough, the next morning I get to my office, I call. He still doesn't answer. So this time I proceed to leave a message. He calls me right back. And when he calls back, he says, I said, why, hey, I called you back. Why didn't you answer? He said, I thought you were going to curse me out. I'm like, really? He said, you won't believe the type of people I've met on this website. I'm like, I can believe it, but why would I do that? But I did tell him, I said, look, I don't know what it is, but I know that you have something to offer me. I said, you have spiritual wealth. And I shared with him, I said, even if nothing ever becomes of it, I would be remiss not to get to know who you are. Because again, I knew he had spiritual value. And then we proceeded to start dating. And needless to say, the courtship continued, not very long because we both knew what we wanted. We had enough of what we didn't want in our lives to know what we did want. And actually, his friend, our pastor, actually married us. And for me, I had my idea. I remember back in 2006 when I was divorced from my first marriage. I remember, and I have here my list. It was written actually 2 days after my divorce was final, of what I wanted or needed or desired in a mate. And I remember after meeting Keith and dating him and actually going over that checklist. But I would say this, it's never how we think it's going to be or how it's going to happen, because here again, you're speaking to someone or listening to someone who would never date anyone who's been incarcerated. Never. It was just not my, I understand. Everyone had their preferences. That was one of mine. That was a no-no. That was a deal breaker. And I never in a million years would have thought I would have married someone who'd been incarcerated. Also, what I understand also now is the importance of waiting, the importance of making God first, because I had made a declaration that very beginning of the year, actually January 1 of 2016. I had wanted to do something different with my children and I. So we had actually, instead of spending New Year's at home, I wanted us to do something different. And we had gotten a villa for that weekend for that New Year, so we can do something different. Lo and behold, that Keith actually lived at that time, maybe 15 minutes.
Yeah,
15 minutes from where we had actually went and got a villa. And that's like 3 hours away from us, So here again, that was in January. Only God knows, our past and our direction, but in that time of waiting, I actually made a declaration, it's going to be me and my children. I'm not going to worry about dating. I'm not going to worry about, I wanted to meet someone as well. I had concerns, because no one gets married to be divorced. It's like you have to heal from that. I had been divorced 11 years before even meeting Keith. And so again, you have to heal. You have to, and you have to be honest with yourself, and you have to trust God for what it is that you want in your life. One of the things also is knowing our worth. Again, I'll say knowing what, having not had, what is it? We've had enough of what we didn't want to know what we did want. And knowing your worth, knowing our value, and the thing that also was so key for me is having spiritual ears to hear when the young lady, the phlebotomist back in December is saying, give it an honest effort. That's not who I really heard. And then, I still, know that I know this was truly God's hand, because I would not have, me and my natural being would not have allowed anyone who had been incarcerated into my life or even my home, as far as with my children. So again, it's just being patient, stepping aside, allowing God to be God in our lives, even when it doesn't feel so great.
And we don't want to close this broadcast. And there's a lot more to this. We're going to do a part 2 where you get to actually hear my side of things and what I was going through at that time as well, to kind of bring us together. And but one of the things that she brought out, and I want to give this advice to anyone who is going through this, whether you are on our broadcast viewing audience or our podcast audience. And if you're on broadcast, you already know that we are an interracial couple. And I'm saying that so people that are listening by podcast, you understand the realm of this, because even dating outside your race is a fear for some people. It was for me. It was something brand new. But I made my list as well, and I'll get into that in part 2. But she said, when she asked me immediately about the incarceration, I was totally honest from the start. And my advice is, anyone with a troubled past, please, no matter how hard it is for you, when you meet people that are going to invest in your life, and it could be a long-term thing, please be honest enough with them, because they deserve to know the truth, to see if that's what they really want. And, God had protected that, and we'll get into it on our next part 2 of this. And we won't leave without finishing our whole story of how God brought us together in a wonderful marriage. But before I leave, and before my wife leaves this broadcast tonight, our main concern is not with us. It's not with what brought us together, how it brought us together. Our main concern is the reason we are together is a relationship with Jesus Christ. He brought us together. He took 2 people and he made them one. Same way he did the Gentiles and the Jewish people. He made one spirit out of 2. He can do that. But you have to have that relationship with him. And if you don't have that relationship with him, or you do have a relationship but you don't feel like it's strong as it should be, or it has regressed some, how about say this simple prayer with me? Because this is as simple as it gets. He said in his word in 1 John 1:9, if we confess our sins, he is quick and just to forgive us of our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. And that is very true. That is what my wife and I had to do in order to have this relationship. So if you will, just talk to God as a friend. Let him know you are a sinner. Let him know you don't have to go through everyone. He knows. And just tell him you want that new start. You want to overcome some of your fears. And he will do that. But you have to give him his time and have patience. And also, too, if you do that, we want to hear from you. Not only at inthegapmotivational.com, where you can reach us, all of our contact information, links to our social media page, but WYTV7 wants to hear from you as well. And they want to hear your story. They want to know what you're getting from these broadcasts, because everybody here volunteers their time to bring this broadcast to you guys so you can enjoy this and we can further the ministry. And to continue doing it, we also need your help. If you'll go to WYTV7.org, you'll see a donate button. And click on that button. Donate. Help us continue to keep going, because it's not just this broadcast. There's many broadcasts and podcasts that come. You can read on the web pages. They have so many things that are going on at WYTV7 Christian Broadcast. But not only for this show and other shows, I want to thank those broadcasters as well, and go listen to some of their broadcasts. They may be touching on other issues that you're dealing with. But until next time, we're going to ask you to stand in the gap with us for those who can't stand for themselves. Next time, we'll be back with part 2. Y'all have a wonderful evening. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.